What happens when a hospital is left to rot? The answer is terrifying. Abandoned hospitals are more than just decaying buildings. They are gateways to chilling past filled with medical horrors, unexplained occurrences, and restless spirits. Across the world, these long-forgotten institutions still stand as grim reminders of suffering, isolation, and human experimentation. Though stripped of patients and staff, they whisper stories to their empty halls, crumbling walls, and blood-stained operating rooms. In this video, we take you inside 5 of the most terrifying real-life abandoned hospitals. From once thriving asylums to trauma-ridden surgical wings, each location holds a dark legacy that continues to haunt those who dare to enter. These aren't just ghost stories. They are echoes of genuine tragedy. Prepare to be unsettled as we peel back the layers of time and expose the truth lurking behind the eerie silence of abandoned hospitals. Tucked away in the woods of Spring City, Pennsylvania, just an hour outside of Philadelphia, the sprawling ruins of Pennhurst State School and hospital lie silent. Cracked windows peer out like vacant eyes from crumbling brick facades. Ivy spills through shattered glass, overtaking tiled hallways where the air once echoed with the shuffle of nurses' shoes and the murmur of restrained patients. Now, only whispers remain, whispers that many claim are not entirely gone. For decades, thrill seekers, ghost hunters, and documentary crews have been drawn to Pennhurst like moths to a dying flame. It's more than just another forgotten asylum. The place feels alive, not with warmth, but with something cold, heavy, residual. There's something about abandoned hospitals that grips the human imagination. Perhaps it's the contrast. Places meant to heal turn into monuments of suffering. Perhaps it's the silence, too complete, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the feeling that even though the beds are empty and the halls are hollow, you're not alone. Pennhurst began with idealistic intentions. Built in 1908 to care for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it promised specialized education, medical care, and compassion. What it delivered, however, was isolation, neglect, and abuse. Over the next 70 years, the institution would grow infamous. So much so that it eventually became a symbol of everything that could go wrong in state-run care. Visitors today walk through its ruins with reverence and dread. Some come for history, others come for answers, and a few come because they've heard the whispers. Because at Pennhurst, the past hasn't left. It lingers in shadows. It waits in corners. It bleeds through time. And sometimes it speaks. Pennhurst's dark history isn't just made of rumors. It's written in court documents, exposés, and testimony from those who lived through its horrors. When the institution opened, it was already overcrowded. Within 4 years, officials were reporting that the facility had reached capacity, housing over 2,000 residents, many of them children labeled as feeble-minded, a cruel and antiquated term. What followed was decades of systemic mistreatment. Staff were overworked, resources were scarce, and patients, many of whom had no families, were often left to fend for themselves in filthy, understaffed wards. Physical abuse was common. Medical neglect was rampant. Children were often left restrained for hours or days at a time. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a 1968 television expose by journalist Bill Baldini titled "Suffer the Little Children." It featured hidden camera footage from inside Pennhurst. Children rocking back and forth in soiled clothing, lying in cribs and bare rooms, wailing for help. The public was horrified, but the damage had been done. Rumors began to circulate of patients who disappeared and were never accounted for, of underground tunnels where the most severe punishments were carried out. Staff who worked the night shift reported hearing knocks on the walls and cries echoing through empty wards. Nurses began refusing to work alone. And in 1987, Pennhurst was finally closed. But closing the doors didn't stop the stories. In fact, it may have made them louder. Today, the buildings remain, some partially restored, others collapsing into themselves. The old administrative hall, Mayflower building, and even the tunnels beneath the facility have been preserved for historical and paranormal tours. And many of those who visit don't leave empty-handed. Some claim to hear moaning, others report being scratched, and a few have captured something chilling on audio, what sounds like a young voice saying softly, "Help me." The line between history and horror blurs at Pennhurst, because here the pain was real, and perhaps it still is. In the hills of Louisville, Kentucky, nestled among thick woods and perpetual mist, stands a 5-story structure that looms like a forgotten fortress. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, once a beacon of hope during the tuberculosis outbreak of the early 20th century, now stands abandoned, its Gothic architecture casting shadows longer than its history. But Waverly Hills is more than just a relic. It is one of the most haunted hospitals in America. Visitors swear the building breathes. Windows fog without reason. Doors creak when there is no wind. And the operating rooms, well, they never seem to sleep. The human fascination with abandoned hospitals finds its crescendo here, because at Waverly Hills, healing and horror were twin children born in the same crib. It was a place meant to save lives, but it became a silent witness to thousands of slow deaths. And somewhere in that transition, the walls began to remember. Built in 1910, Waverly Hills began as a small facility to treat those suffering from tuberculosis, the White Plague. As the epidemic grew, so did the building. It expanded to accommodate more than 400 patients, operating at full capacity during the peak of the crisis. The treatment? Fresh air, sunlight, and surgeries that would make modern medicine flinch. Doctor performed radical procedures, often without anesthesia. Lungs were collapsed, ribs removed. In one case, a patient underwent an experimental surgery involving the insertion of balloons into their chest cavity. Many never left the table, yet death was so common it became routine, so much so that a body chute, a 500-foot tunnel beneath the hospital, was constructed to discreetly transport corpses downhill, away from the eyes of still living patients. Staff called it the death tunnel. Some say the bodies were moved quietly to preserve morale. Others believe the tunnel was meant to hide the truth, that more people were dying than surviving. Paranormal investigators have made Waverly Hills a mecca. Thermal cameras catch figures pacing in hallways. EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, record breathy whispers and disembodied screams. Visitors report being touched, scratched, or hearing their names called when no one else is present. The 5th floor, particularly room 502, has drawn the most attention. Legend says a nurse was found hanging in that room in the 1930s after she discovered she was pregnant and unmarried. A scandal at the time. Others claim another nurse jumped from the window just 2 years later. Today, visitors report hearing a woman crying in the dark and feeling an overwhelming sense of despair upon entering the room. There are also tales of a little boy named Timmy who plays with a ball in the hallways. Paranormal teams have left toys and returned to find them moved. One video even shows a ball rolling on its own against the grain of the floor. Waverly Hills was also the site of countless medical trials. Records show that patients were used to test new treatments, some of which bordered on torture. Consent was rarely given. After all, TB patients were considered doomed. Ethics were optional. The building itself was designed like a panopticon. Long hallways, open wards, rooms facing outward so that sunlight and air could circulate. But those same features made privacy impossible. Many patients died alone. Their final moments echoed through tile corridors and sterile walls. Today, some wonder if that lingering suffering has seeped into the building itself. Is it residual energy, or something more intelligent? Something waiting? Waverly Hills has since been purchased by preservationists who offer historical and paranormal tours. They aim to restore parts of the building and educate the public about its dual legacy of medical history and spiritual mystery. And yet, even in efforts to breathe life back into it, Waverly resists. Equipment malfunctions. Lights flicker inexplicably. Workers report cold spots and sudden feelings of being watched. Maybe the sanatorium doesn't want to be forgotten. Maybe it wants us to remember what happened there. Or maybe it never really closed. Next time you pass an abandoned hospital, ask yourself, are the ghosts really trapped there, or do they stay because we keep looking for them? If this story stirred something in you, leave a comment below. Have you ever visited a place like Waverly Hills? Or perhaps heard whispers in the dark where there should be none? Located in Westland, Michigan, the massive ruins of the Eloise Psychiatric Hospital sprawl across nearly 1,000 acres, once home to over 70 buildings. Today, only a handful remain, cloaked in overgrowth and shadow. The others have been demolished, yet the memories persist. Eloise was more than a hospital. It was a city within itself. It had its own police force, bakery, dairy farm, power plant, and even a cemetery. But behind the self-sufficient facade lay stories that continue to haunt Michigan's darkest folklore. Visitors today report more than just chills when they step onto cracked walkways of the Eloise grounds. They claim to hear sobbing from empty rooms, catch glimpses of pale faces through shattered windows, and feel cold hands brushing against their backs in the dark. Some even say the building breathes, groaning and creaking in ways that don't match wind or time. There is something undeniably magnetic about places like Eloise, hospitals meant to heal that instead became places of irreversible sorrow draw us in. Because we want to understand, we want to witness, we want to know what went so horribly wrong. The Eloise complex began as the Wayne County Poorhouse in 1839. By the 20th century, it evolved into a massive medical complex divided into 3 parts: the Eloise Hospital for Mental Illness, a general hospital, and a tuberculosis sanitarium. At its peak in the 1940s, it housed over 10,000 patients. While some wards operated under ethical standards of the time, others descended into nightmare. Overcrowding, underfunding, and social stigma allowed for mistreatment to flourish unchecked. Patients often arrive with vague diagnoses, committed for conditions like melancholia, or simply for being socially unwanted. Once inside, many never left. Reports from former staff and patient families tell of padded rooms, unmarked graves, and experimental treatments, including insulin shock therapy, lobotomies, and early electroshock procedures. One nurse, who worked night shifts in the 1970s, later said, "You didn't walk those halls alone, not because of the patients, but because you knew something else was there, watching." As the mental health system began to change in the late 20th century, Eloise slowly closed its wards. The psychiatric hospital officially shut down in the 1980s, and the remaining buildings fell into decay. But those who explored them afterward discovered more than rotting ceilings and graffiti. They found medical charts left behind, blood-stained linens, and padded restraints still attached to rusted bed frames. Some even claimed to find messages scratched into walls, "Still here," or names repeated over and over in frantic handwriting. Ghost hunters and paranormal investigators consider Eloise one of the most active haunted sites in the Midwest. EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, captured in the old psychiatric building include cries for help, maniacal laughter, and even the hiss of whispered names. One well-known tale involves the spirit of a former nurse named Margaret, who allegedly hanged herself in the attic after years of guilt. Visitors say they see a woman in white, pacing from window to window in the early hours. Others report being physically touched, scratched, or even pushed when alone. Another tale tells of a room in the basement where patients were kept during the most violent outbursts. The door, they say, sometimes slams shut on its own. And no matter how hard you try, it won't open again for exactly 1 hour. Skeptics argue these occurrences are psychological responses to fear. The power of suggestion is strong in a place like Eloise, but when multiple visitors with no connection to each other report the same experiences, even the skeptics begin to wonder. Eloise, like many hospitals of its time, became a testing ground for medical techniques that now seem barbaric. Some practices, like music therapy and early psychiatric counseling, were progressive, but others, including solitary confinement for the nonviolent and forced sterilizations, have left deep moral scars. There are claims, still unproven, of undocumented experiments conducted in hidden rooms beneath the complex. Blueprints show sealed-off areas with no official designation. When a local urban explorer claimed to have found surgical instruments and journals in one such room in 2007, the building was quickly locked and sealed by authorities. The findings were never confirmed. The weight of these secrets adds to the aura of Eloise. Its history is not just about sickness, but systemic abuse masked as care. The whispers that echo through its halls aren't only ghostly. They are reminders of real human suffering, forgotten by time, but not by the walls. Today, parts of Eloise have been converted into senior housing and office space. Other sections remain closed, boarded up, or demolished, but the legend persists. Paranormal tours still operate on the grounds. Local preservationists fight to maintain what's left as a warning of how easily the well-intentioned can go awry. Eloise stands as both monument and mausoleum, a place where history, horror, and healing intersect. And as you stand at the edge of its crumbling facade, ask yourself, what do the walls remember? Have you ever stepped into a place and felt the weight of sorrow pressing against your chest? If so, what do you believe was truly left behind? Perched atop a misty hill in Louisville, Kentucky, the Waverly Hills Sanatorium looms like a forgotten cathedral of suffering. Long before it became one of the most haunted places in America, Waverly Hills was supposed to be a beacon of hope. Built in 1910 to treat victims of the tuberculosis epidemic, it was state-of-the-art for its time. Spacious porches lined with beds allowed patients to breathe what they believed was fresh, curative air. But that promise quickly rotted under the weight of tragedy. At its peak, Waverly housed over 400 patients, most of whom wouldn't survive. There were no antibiotics then, only rest, surgery, and hope. And when hope ran out, silence took over. Today, Waverly Hills is abandoned, its windows shattered, its hallways echoing only with the wind. But locals don't come near, not after sundown, not after what they've heard. And it all seems to lead to the 5th floor. Waverly's 5th floor was small, only a nurse's station and 2 patient rooms. But for decades, rumors swirled about room 502. It said that in 1928, a young nurse was found hanging from the light fixture of that very room. Pregnant, unmarried, and deeply ashamed, she reportedly took her own life. Some say she was driven mad by the death surrounding her. Others whisper that she was pushed. Then in 1932, another nurse reportedly leapt from the balcony just outside the same room. No note, no witnesses, just a body broken on the pavement and more silence. Visitors today say room 502 is wrong, cold even in summer. People report being pushed, scratched, or overcome with nausea the moment they step inside. Paranormal investigators have caught voices, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing. One voice, in particular, keeps repeating, "I didn't jump." Those who hear it never forget it. But if Waverly's 5th floor is its heart, then its spine is the infamous body chute, a 500-foot tunnel running from a hospital down the hill to the railway line below. Officially, it was built to transport supplies. Unofficially, It was used to move the dead during the worst of the outbreak. It's estimated that one body per hour was sent down that tunnel. Covered wagons, quiet footsteps, and cold, white sheets. The idea was to spare the other patients from witnessing the constant procession of death. Now, the tunnel is choked with debris and darkness. Visitors have reported hearing dragging footsteps and whispers from below. One investigator claimed she saw the silhouette of a nurse holding a clipboard, only to find no one there. Another described a child's giggle echoing through the pitch black. There are no children buried there. Security guards assigned to protect the site, mainly from urban explorers. Telelights flickering in patterns, windows slamming shut with no wind, and the heavy sound of coughing echoing through empty rooms. Some have quit after just one shift. One guard, who spoke under anonymity, said he was doing a sweep at 2 a.m. when he heard something metallic dragging behind him. He turned to find a rusted gurney rolling on its own, slowly following him down the hallway. He fled and never returned. Then there's a man with no face, seen by multiple visitors. He's described as tall, in a hospital gown with a blank, featureless face. Just smooth skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should be. He stands at the end of the hallway, never moving, always watching. He's become so common, tour guides have given him a name, the Watcher. Waverly Hills has since become a destination for ghost tours and TV crews. But even the skeptics admit there's something heavy in the air, whether it's residual energy, trauma, or something worse. The building seems to remember. The owners have tried to preserve it. Part history, part haunted attraction. But even they admit that some nights, they don't linger too long after closing. You can hear them, one said. Not just patients, nurses, coughing, crying, footsteps, breathing. The building isn't empty. It's just waiting. So next time you see a fog-covered hill crowned by broken brick and silent windows, ask yourself, what if the hospital never let go of its patients? What if they're still waiting for you? Nestled deep within the Maryland woods, the crumbling remains of Forest Haven Asylum are easy to miss. Nature has reclaimed much of the land. Vines strangle what's left of the once grand buildings, and shattered glass crunches underfoot as curious explorers make their way inside. But beneath the overgrown silence lies a history so dark, so tragic, that even the trees seem to whisper warnings. Forest Haven was meant to be a sanctuary. Opened in 1925, it served as a facility for children and adults with intellectual disabilities. Tucked away from the public eye, it promised care, structure, and a better life. For decades, families left their children in the hands of the institution, believing they were doing what was best. But the truth was far from the promise. By the 1960s, Forest Haven had fallen into neglect and disrepair. Overcrowding and understaffing plagued the facility. Children were warehoused like forgotten possessions. Abuse, both physical and emotional, was rampant. Medical neglect led to the deaths of dozens, possibly hundreds. Bodies were buried in unmarked graves on the hospital grounds. Some of the children were nonverbal. Others were simply misunderstood or abandoned. Many had no one to advocate for them. In time, they became ghosts of the world and perhaps to themselves. In 1991, Forest Haven was finally shut down after a series of lawsuits and damning federal reports. But by then, the damage had already been done, and some believe that not everyone left the grounds. Today, Forest Haven is a decaying shell, popular among urban explorers and paranormal investigators. Visitors report overwhelming feelings of sorrow upon entering, as if the building itself remembers. Broken cribs, rusted wheelchairs, and forgotten toys lie scattered through moldy rooms. Some have claimed to hear children's laughter echoing in the halls. followed by sudden, chilling silence. Others report shadowy figures darting just beyond the edge of flashlight beams. Electronic equipment often malfunctions. EVPs have captured whispers, soft, pleading, unintelligible. In one documented case, a paranormal team heard what they described as a lullaby, sung by a child completely alone. Building 7 was once the medical ward. It is considered the most active part of the campus. Investigators report doors slamming shut, cold spots, and inexplicable crying. One former staff member, now elderly, confessed anonymously in an interview that some kids died during experimental treatments, and we were told to never speak of it. Local legends say that one child, a boy named Elijah, still roams the halls, looking for his sister who was adopted before he died. His presence is often accompanied by a sharp drop in temperature and the sound of soft weeping. Visitors leave gifts in certain rooms, dolls, candies, tiny shoes. Some are found moved or rearranged the next day. One photo, taken in daylight, showed what appears to be a child's handprint, pressed from the inside of a second-story window. No one was on that floor at the time. What makes Forest Haven so terrifying is not just the ghosts. It is the truth of how a system failed the most vulnerable, how silence, bureaucracy, and shame allowed suffering to go unnoticed for decades. The fear is not a child's ghost at the end of a corridor. It is a horror how easily society can forget its children. Today, preservationists are fighting to protect the site as a reminder of what went wrong. But others argue it should be erased, that the memories are too painful. As the sun sets over the trees and darkness crawls through the broken windows, Forest Haven sleeps. But if you listen closely, you may hear the past stirring. A quiet voice, a muffled cry, and a question: did we really leave anyone behind? Even in ruin, these hospitals continue to breathe dread into the world around them. They are places where the line between history and horror blurs, where echoes of pain and desperation linger in every corridor. What was once a sanctuary for healing has become a monument to the forgotten, the abused, and the lost. Some say these buildings are haunted by ghosts. Others believe it's the weight of collective trauma that makes the air feel heavier. The shadows seem longer. Whatever the case, one thing is certain: the silence of these places speaks volumes. So, what do you believe? Are these just stories, or is something truly left behind in the walls of abandoned hospitals? Share your thoughts below. Tell us if you've ever stepped inside one of these haunted halls, or if you ever would. And if these chilling tales move you, don't forget to subscribe to Tales Nameless for more journeys into the unknown.